in mathematics, we frequently find some very cool patterns. One of them, the most famous one, is called Pythagorean triples. What that means is three numbers that are okay to be sides of a right triangle, 3, 4, 5. And the reason that you can tell it's a Pythagorean triple, it's a right triangle, in other words, is that 3 squared is 9 and 4 squared is 16. And if you add 9 and 16, you get 25, which is c squared. Now, if you double 3, 4, and 5 and get 6, 8, 10, you will get another Pythagorean triple, because 6 squared is 36, 8 squared is 64. You add them together, you get 100, and that's 10 squared. And that is very cool. And it works for lots of, there's an infinite number, literally, of Pythagorean triples. Typically, when I give this lesson, which is, proportions with 3 variables. Here's an example. 4 painters can paint 6 houses in 14 weeks. So 4 painters, 6 houses painted in 14 weeks. And you want to know at that rate. Now, the reason I say at that rate is that we all know that 2 people don't usually work at the same speed, but this is a way of estimating how long it's going to take and how many painters it's going to take. So the question is, how many painters are needed to paint 12 houses in 28 weeks? So, well, that's 12 houses in 28. And most people look at this and say, well, 12 is 2 times 6 and 28 is 2 times 14. And so X is probably 2 times 4. And that's not right. Here's why. I want you to understand why. If you double the number of painters, that will double the amount of work that you can do without changing the time at all. Or if you double the amount of time, here's what will happen. In 14 weeks, these 4 painters will paint 6 houses. And then in the subsequent 14 weeks, they'll paint another 6 houses. And that's why the answer is 4, which a few of you got when I asked you this before this taping started. All right. Let's see how this looks. So I've done this ahead of time to save time. This is an incredibly powerful, accessible, and little known technique to work tricky problems like this. And here's why it's little known. For math majors and some others who are really good at this sort of thing, there is a rather complicated process that says, well, here is an equation. If something is directly proportional to something else and inversely proportional to something else, I made it so simple that you'll be amazed at how simple this actually is. So here it goes. The number of houses painted is directly proportional to the number of painters multiplied by the number of days they work, or in this case, weeks. Why is that? Well, because if you double one of these, painters or weeks, it doubles the thing. And if you double both of them, it's going to be like 2 times 2. So here is what kind of equation you get out of this with the proportion. The number of houses painted is directly proportional to the number of painters times the number of, in this case, weeks. So that means the weeks is 28, the painters is X. 28 times X divided by 12 must equal 14 times 4 divided by 6. Really? Absolutely. Because that's how proportions work. Now, when you do this, you find, the way I do it is I find the X that his partner is on the other side of the equal sign, on the other side of the fraction bar. So that's going to be 6 times 28X is going to equal 12 times 4 times 14. Now, when you do that, if you want to, you can multiply 6 times 28, and you can multiply 12 times 4 times 14. But here is a very cute and useful work, which often prevents errors, believe it or not. The more times you have to do numbers on your calculator. So here it is, 12. I'm going to do this calculation, times 4 times 14. I could say equals, and if that were 12 plus 4 times 14, I would have to say equals. Now, here is the trick. To divide by 6 times 28, I can either multiply 6 times 28, or, and here's the cute part, I can divide this by 6 and then divide it by 28. And guess what that is? That's 4. That's one number you need to know is the number 4. Remember that commercial? Well, here it is again. So that's really cool. And here's another little example. All this is in your book somewhere. So here it is. If 6 painters can paint 7 houses in 24 days, how many houses can 18 painters paint in 72 days? And again, the workers times the time, 16 times 24 divided by 7 must equal 18 times 72 divided by X. That's how proportions work. So 18 times 72 happens to be 1296 and over X. So this many, it's called painter days, because the number of painters times the time in this case is 18 painters, 6 painters, 6 times 24. This is 18 painters times 72. And the other side is always going to be 6 times 24 divided by 7 for this data. All right, so I've worked this out. 1296 over X must equal 144 over 7. Again, cross multiply, 144X must equal 7 times 1296, which happens to be 9072. Divided it out and get 63. And here's the logic behind it. If you triple the number of painters and you triple the time, that is going to increase the number of houses by not just 3, but 3 times 3, which is 9. And of course, 9 times 7 is indeed 63. I'm hoping that this is going to give you a little, your intuition a boost. All right, now, the page that you really need to know about for this particular topic on the coming test, the next test, whenever that is, in the syllabus, this is page 30 in your book. This is what you're going to use to do your homework assignment, I hope. And here it is. We're going to assume that the workers times the time is directly proportional to the amount of work that they do. And we're going to assume that 4 painters can paint 10 houses in 6 weeks. And as I mentioned, painters vary in how fast they are, but this is a way of estimating, especially if you own the business. All right, so this is how you work the problem if the number of workers is unknown. You take that workers times time. This is 23, P times 23 over 19. Okay, that's 23P over 19. That must equal 40 over 6. And in fact, for all of these kinds of problems, with this data, they're all going to have 40 over 6 on one side, which is kind of cool, especially if you do it in this format. All right, so then you multiply 6 times 23P must equal 19 times 40. And again, you can multiply those 6 times 23 together and 40 times 19, or you can just say 40 times 19 divided by 6 divided by 23, and you're done. If the amount of work is unknown, this means how many houses can 9 painters paint in 7 weeks? So again, 9 times 7 over W, boom, must equal, guess what? 4 times 10 over 6. And yes, you can just leave it 4 times 10, or you can just write 40. It's up to you. Depends on how agreeable the numbers are. Now, I put it in here, but actually the T is what the important part is. It's time. So 15T over 13 must equal, guess what? 40 over 6. Once more, you cross multiply. 6 times 15T must equal 13 times 40. And I'll show you that little technique again. So you can either write 90T, or this is my favorite, you can do 40 times 13. And I'm going to divide by 6 times 15. So I can just divide it by 6 and then divide it by 15. And 5.7 repeating, which I've asked you to answer to the nearest 0.01 means 2 decimal places. Please pay attention to that on the test, because it is so it's painful to me to take points off when you've done the right calculation. And some people ask me at the time of the test, what does it mean to round to 2 decimal places? Well, I'm not going to answer that question during the test. That's what we went through just now. Now we're going to do a little homework on page 31. Let's see how I can make this work.